Now we're going to welcome Luca Schnetzler and Jack Sanniota to the Zoom to talk about community in a digital world. As digital identities have grown, so have digital communities. Often, however, it can be difficult to keep these communities together. For those that don't know, Luca is the CEO at Pudgy Penguins and has fostered one of the strongest NFT communities that we have seen to date. Jack is a student at Georgia Tech and co-director of the conference and avid Pudgy Penguins fan and holder. I think that this will be a super interesting conversation, provided that Jack can keep it together in the call. I know that he's a massive fan, so let's all welcome Jack and Luca to the conference.
Well, Luca, thank you so much. For those of you that don't know, Luca is the CEO of Pudgy Penguins. It's one of the biggest NFT projects in the entire world. He's a very, very busy man. And Luca, I can't thank you enough for taking some time just to talk through some stuff with us and to help educate our audience.
No, thank you for having me. And hey, everybody in Atlanta, I hope you guys are having a great time.
Cool. So I figured we'd start with a quick intro, talk about your traditional background. I know it's social media marketing for the most part. So what was your life like before Pudgy Penguins?
Yeah, so my story in a short version, high school dropout, didn't make it past sophomore year. I got my first job at a tech startup called Ring, started my first business at 18, did super well. And then I went to co-found a multitude of different consumer product goods. One of the products that I worked on most recently is the Gel Blaster, which you guys are probably familiar with. And so, yeah, serial entrepreneur, huge consumer product good guy, and now taking my talents to Web3.
Awesome. Cool. So, people make jokes about how you can copy and paste NFTs. And then, it's just pictures and people in the Discord. But I want to get your opinion on what NFTs are really good for, and then how the technology possibly can evolve throughout time.
Yeah, I think at its core, NFTs just resemble ownership, right? And I think that can go into a multitude of different ways. I think the age of boring NFTs is going to be coming around pretty soon. I think the technology itself could be super helpful for things like authenticity issues, whether you're buying a Dyson vacuum cleaner and it's an authentic Dyson or a Jordan or any other, fine collectible. Specifically in the PFP space, I think it's really identity and ownership. Like, hey, this is how I can represent myself to like-minded individuals in my community. And hopefully, the founder of X NFT project is providing a stream to provide ownership and make that IP valuable. So I think in layman's terms, I think that's kind of how I look at it. But I think the mass adoption will really come with NFTs when the whole boring trend starts. And I think the technology itself, understanding consumer product goods, the issues of slippage and just authenticity in general, I think really is where NFTs are going to help.
Sweet, thanks. Like you said, your background is in traditional product goods, and then you kind of did a little bit of a 180 into Web3, purchased Pudgy Penguins for quite a bit of money. Why did you decide to make that complete career change? What motivated you to do it? I mean, how do you look back on the decision?
Yeah, so I've paid attention to trends pretty much since I was 10, 12 years old, and there's been only a few moments in my life where I saw something and I thought it was the future. And at the time, those previous moments, I didn't really have the capability to kind of dive into those specific industries. And this is the first time in my professional career that I saw something that undoubtedly is going to be the way that the internet goes. And so I could continue doing what I was doing, which was, a pretty successful venture to say the least. But I felt to myself, like, at the end of the day, I want to create an impact. I want to be a part of something bigger than me. And this is the first time that I've been in a position of power to dive into something that I thought was going to be unequivocally the future. And so I thought about it long and hard. I trusted my gut. I decided to take the risk. And I encourage everybody listening. I think I'm one of those few entrepreneurs that's really been able to make a lot of money in several different industries. and I've never seen an industry like this. This, with every part of my body, I believe that this is going to be the future. And there's only so many moments in your life that you're going to be able to be at the forefront and the beginning stages of something that's going to shape the world. And this is one of them. So I decided to take the risk, jump in here with both feet, and play my part.
Well, sweet. It certainly turned out pretty well so far. So congratulations on that. So for the CEO of a project with over $100 million in sales, you're pretty young. I mean, we talked earlier, you said you're 24 years old, which is, and fascinating for me as a 22-year-old that there's someone that's only 2 years older than me that's having such an impact on the space. And what do you say that your ability to run this project has, or what does your ability to run this project say about the opportunity for young people like you, like me, in the space? And do you have any advice for newcomers or potential founders that would be interested in doing something similar?
And so I don't want to discriminate by saying this, but I do think this is a young person space. Now, you could be older and you could totally conquer and dominate. But the reason why I say it's a younger person space is because, our generation grew up almost native to the internet and to like social media. Like Instagram came around when I was in 6th grade. Like, my brain we're the first generation that's now in a position of power that was kind of programmed on what we know the internet to be. And I think, from a young person's perspective, we know how this stuff works intuitively better than anybody else, right? Just because of the way that we've been programmed since, this technology came out when we were in elementary and middle school. And I think that gives us a core advantage over the rest because we understand it. There's just like something to be said about giving tens of thousands of hours of your time to something and kind of being native to that. And so I think we understand, the weak points better than most. But I think it's challenging to say the least. I think depending on which business model you kind of pursue, I think there's a lot of different places in Web3 that you can conquer. There's infrastructure, there's payments, there's community. I think, finding which lane. But in my specific lane, which I think is more of like the community and the IP lane, I mean, it's hard to say the least. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving variables. I think Web3 in general is less direct of a business than, let's say a traditional, hey, I'm doing a donut shop or I'm doing an e-commerce website. It's very straightforward, get customer, make margin. I think there's more moving parts here, but at the end of the day, like that's the beauty about the challenge. And I really believe that if you can build a successful Web3 business, building a Web2 business is like a piece of cake. Like they're not even comparable, at least per my experience up until this point. And so for anybody listening that's open to conquering the challenge, I highly recommend it. And it's going to season you and put you in a position that will give you a huge advantage over the rest.
Sweet. Yeah, I can speak from personal experience. Traditional industries, they look at your resume and that's what defines you. But in Web3, nobody cares about what your experience is traditionally. All they care about is if you're willing to work, willing to learn, and have tried to do it on your own. So I think that's great advice. Appreciate you sharing. I did want to turn a little bit more back to the community aspect of NFTs. The original team failed to deliver on promises. The community voted and ousted them. What does this say about the power and influence of a community in the NFT project?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty interesting. But community in Web3 is giving pretty much like the overarching power of, the yes or no's that kind of go. It's interesting in that respect. But I will say this, I think in hindsight, I kind of regret my approach to some of my Web2 businesses, learning what I've learned in Web3. But if you really deduce the success of every great company that's out there right now, community is a huge variable there. And so I built a lot of Web2 businesses with kind of community as like layer 3 or layer 4. But if you look at like Apple or, Chewy or, Bear, I mean, like, dude, every single major blue chip company has a huge underlying, thesis on community. And it's a huge part as to why they're successful. I mean, people just buy iPhones every year, not because they need a new phone, but just because they want to be on that cutting edge and because that community is built that way, right? Let's see what Apple does with the artists and the storytellers. Like they've almost been embodying a Web3 ethos for 10, 15 years now. They just kind of gatekeep it into their audience and kind of funnel it that way. but
Yeah.
community is everything. Like if you want to build a really successful company, it's not just in Web3. I think Web3 just puts an emphasis on it. But building big companies, community was such an interesting thing for me to understand, because you like think it and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But like it's one thing to like get it and one thing to really understand it. And now that I really understand it, I look back and I'm like, so many opportunities that I missed, that I could have really built an amazing community and I didn't. And so community is not something to just leave in Web3. It's something you can apply anywhere. And if at a minimum anybody learns anything from this conversation, is that, no matter what business you're building, community is imperative. And I think Web3 it's quite literally the backbone of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you first took over the project, you held many calls with the community to decide the direction of Pudgy Penguin. I was actually in attendance to a lot of those calls. But what was your thought process with that, and how else have you utilized the community to help kind of rebuild the image of Pudgy Penguins?
Yeah, so I really believe like the difference between a Web2 company and a Web3 company is a Web3 company builds with their community, and a Web2 company, builds kind of for the community, right? And so for me, like I didn't want to come into this business and run a dictatorship. Like that's not the point of this, right? Like the point of this is to collaboratively create this hive mind in which we all kind of share our ideas. And then I take those ideas, deduce the ones that I think are most advantageous, and then put the muscle behind it, which is what our core team is. That's what I think Web3 is about. I think that's the beauty of it. And I also think that's the advantage of it. At the end of the day, many minds are stronger than 1, 2, or 3, or 4. And your community is a multitude of minds. And at the end of the day, some ideas might be bad, some ideas might be amazing. And the other day, somebody told me something and I was like, oh my God, that's genius. And I think, to not treat a Web3 company and not collaborate with your community like that is to not really understand what Web3 is. And again, back to the core competency of us being younger and us understanding that. Like I understand what that means, when somebody says Web3, just because of how I natively grew up and was programmed with social media, like it's a collaborative process. Yeah. And so I think a lot of people just, see like, oh, hey, I can sell stuff on the blockchain. I can sell digital collectibles, NFTs, whatever that is. I can, give utility to my community and then just make every decision and do it myself. And that's just not what Web3 is. Web3 is, a group of people building the future, right? And so if I believe Pudgy Penguins is the future, then I have to align with the people that are a part of it with me, which is my group and my community, and we have to figure this thing out together. Now, every single idea can't be relayed. Every single thought process can't be discussed. But I think the major pivotal points, within reason, you have to talk about it and you have to make sure everybody is aligned, because the beauty about it, and I think people see the advantage, is like you quite literally, your holders are like your MLM marketers. Like if they're aligned and they like what you're doing, their power and their influence is going to push the rest. And then you've created this avalanche chain reaction style effect, snowball effect, right? And just people, I think, are just not understanding what the space really is, and are just seeing the money opportunity. And it's quite literally a community-driven process, and I think that's why we've been so successful up until this point.
Sweet, great answer. As a community member myself, I've appreciated your leadership and guidance, so thank you. Cool. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what Pudgy Penguins is doing to give back to the community. I know that recently I don't know if pivoted is the right word, but you've gone into producing real life plush toys that have been licensed from the Pudgy Penguin community themselves. So why did you do this? Can you talk us through like what that process was like, and then how it's benefited the product as a whole?
Yeah, I think to understand my decision making, you have to also understand my thought process. And so my thought process is really derived this way. At the end of the day, people are buying NFTs for 2 reasons. 1, because they like the art and they like the identity, which is a great reason. And I fully support. And I think that should be everyone's core reason, no matter what, because at the end of the day, the space is too early that if like you don't like the art at the minimum, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then 2, they're buying into utility. And to me, utility is quantified in 2 different ways. First, you have emotional utility. And emotional utility, I think, comes from being a Pudgy Penguin in the community and then meeting friends and then you guys building a relationship and getting your best friend out of that, or maybe finding a significant other, or maybe going on our Instagram and seeing your penguin on a post, relaying some sort of positive affirmation and then seeing a bunch of comments saying like, whoa, that changed my life, that impacted me. Or maybe, me selling a t-shirt or a toy and then, that being sold and then given to a niece and nephew or son or a daughter, and then them loving that, t-shirt or toy and then them holding on to it. Like that to me is emotional utility. And I think Pudgy Penguins probably does that, is probably one of the best at doing that in my opinion, because I think the IP warrants it. And as a team, it's something I've been focusing on since day one, because I believe emotional utility is more powerful than people think. So emotional utility, one. But two, you have transactional utility, which basically means make the person, provide value in the form of money, whether it's Ethereum or dollars, to the holder as some sort of asset that, appreciates in some capacity. And that has been the utility that people have loved the most up until this point. And so the transactional utility that has occurred that has been super successful has been things like airdrops and, of new NFTs. And then so they sell it, or maybe an airdrop of a coin and then they sell it. The problem is to monetize this type of utility, all of it includes selling the assets you were given or selling the core asset, i.e. sell the NFT, price goes up, sell it, monetize it, make a profit, transactional utility. Or maybe receive an airdrop, I sell it, transactional utility, you made me money. Unfortunately, I don't believe that transactional utility is sustainable. And especially in a bear market, it's almost it's like it never works, right?
Agreed.
No liquidity, there's not enough volume. So my job as a CEO is I thought to myself, well, I have to build a Web 2 business because I have to build growable, forecastable revenue. Right now, just letting you guys know, an NFT business is not a business you can forecast and project and grow. For the simple reason that if Ethereum takes an 80% haircut one month, forget about all your projections and everything you forecasted. You're completely screwed because you're going to make no money, or you're going to make exponentially less than what you forecasted. So I have to build, a real business. But in that same sense, like, how do I bring that value and that success of that Web 2 business, and how do I bring that back to our holders? Because, I can't just be like, hey, I'm going to build a cool toy company or t-shirt company, and then like, hey guys, you guys have the NFT. Like, hopefully this is like, this turns out like a first edition Pokemon, but I'm not going to do anything for you. And like, good luck. And I hope the emotional utility suffices. But I kind of positioned it where, as this Web 2 business grows, every product, every piece of marketing, every piece of content that we make, I want to bring that value back to the holder, right, in some capacity. And so with the toys, 16 SKUs of toys, 16 licensing arrangements with 16 holders of 16 penguins that live on the blockchain. We basically took 16 penguins and turned them into toys. And so when those toys go and do hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, there will be money that translates back to the holder base. And so you've then created transactional utility that's legitimate, right? It's not like a Ponzi scheme where it's like, here's airdrop, sell airdrop, make money. It's like a true, pure transaction that if Ethereum goes to zero tomorrow, it won't matter because that agreement is still in place and your IP is still being monetized. Where I think I'm winning, and where, people I think have fallen short up until this point, is like, make the IP that your holders hold monetizable, and don't just say, hey, go monetize it. Because as a company, you have an obligation to push your company forward and to generate more revenue. And as you pursue that, you can bring that value back to the holder. Now, am I going to make, a holder $100 million, or am I going to make every single holder money? No, not necessarily. And that's kind of the flaw in the model. But I've worked on, I've already fixed that, but I won't say it here. But at the end of the day, like, that's how I thought about it and how we got to where we are.
Cool. Yeah, that's fair enough. I was gonna try to dig for some alpha at some point, but I know you're pretty disciplined, so I won't try too hard.
Yeah, I'm good at that.
Cool. So when I was walking around the event earlier, I saw some people that had Pudgy Penguins on their cards. I know there's some people in the crowd, in the community. Is there anything that you'd like to say to them, or just the community at large?
Yeah, I mean, the community knows this, but I'm super grateful for you guys' support. For everybody in the Web3 ATL audience that's a Pengu, thank you for representing and showing your tufts and your Pengus to the world. I appreciate it. And I'm here to grind every single day, 7 days a week, except Saturdays during the day. I try not to grind on Saturdays during the day, as Jack, you and I spoke about. But I'm extremely grateful for all the Penguin support, and like to the final point, like the Penguin community, I think is second to none. Like the type of talent and builders. I mean, Jack, you're a testament to it. Like it's one of the few communities where like everybody in it is doing something like in this realm, right? And it's just beautiful to watch and beautiful to experience. And I'm super grateful to be, leading the charge. But I'm just one Penguin in a very big huddle. So thank you guys.
Well put. I think we should end on a good note. Luca, thank you so much for your time. It's been a blast. I'm certain that people will take some stuff away from what you said. Just can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Jack. And later, Web3 ATL, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.